Today I shall be taking a lecture on questions and issues of defining sense of community. After I finish my module, you will be in a position to know the definition of community as has been defined by theorists. You will also learn the ways to theorize the sense of community as experienced by people, identify the issues regarding definition of community, evaluate the shortcomings of how sense of community is defined, also analyze the various ways to overcome the difficulties of definition of a sense of community. Let me begin my lecture with telling you what a community means. The Oxford Dictionary defines community as a group of people living in the same geographic location or having a certain characteristic in common. Sociologically, community is defined as the people of a district or country with a collective set of social values and responsibilities. Ecology, on the other hand, simply refers to communities as comprising of a group of interdependent plants and or animals living together in a specific natural habitat. There's a lot of debate about what aspects of a community one has to look at when studying it from a psychological perspective. Should psychologists limit communities to particular geographical areas? Or should the norms and rules of communities be included in that definition? Does race and ethnicity play a part in the community formation? These are some of the issues that psychologists have to deal with when attempting to define a community or a sense of community. Now, understanding the community entails understanding it in a number of ways. Whether or not the community is defined geographically, it still has a geographic context, a setting that it exists in. Getting a clear sense of this setting may be a key to a full understanding of it. At the same time, it's important to understand the specific community you are concerned with. You have to get to know its people, their culture, their concerns and their relationships, and to develop your own relationships with them as well. Moving on to physical aspects. Every community has a physical presence of some sort, even if only one building. Most have a geographic area or areas that are either defined by or attached to. Now, it is important to know the community's size and the look and the feel of its buildings, its topography, which is the lay of the land, the hills, valleys, rivers, roads and other features, and each of its neighborhoods. Now, also important are how various areas of the community differ from one another, and whether your impression is one of clean, well-maintained houses and streets, or one of shabbiness, dirt and neglect. If the community is one defined by its population, then its physical properties are also defined by the population. Where they live, where they gather, the places that are important to them. The characteristics of those places can tell you a great deal about the people who make up the community. Their self-image, many of their attitudes, their aspirations are often reflected in the places where they choose or have to be forced by circumstances or discrimination to live, work, gather and play. Next on the list of my discussion is infrastructure. Roads, bridges, transportation, which is the local public transport, airports, train lines, etc. Electricity, landline and mobile telephone service, broadband services and similar basics make up the infrastructure of any community, without which it cannot function. Next is the patterns of settlement, commerce and industry. Where are those physical spaces we have been discussing? Communities reveal their character by where and how they create living and working spaces. Where there are true slums, substandard housing in areas with few or no services that are only options for low income people. The value the larger community places on those residents seems clear. Are heavy industries located next to residential neighborhoods? If so, who lives in those neighborhoods? Are some parts of the community dangerous, either because of high crime and violence or because of unsafe conditions in the built or natural environment? Next is the demographics. It is vital to understand who makes up the community. Age, gender, race, ethnicity, marital status, education, number of people in the household, first language. These and other statistics make up the demographic profile of the population. When you put them together, example the educational level of women between the ages of 18 to 24, it gives you a clear picture of who community residents are. Next on the list is history. The long-term history of the community can tell you about community traditions and what the community is or has been proud of, and what is it that the residents would prefer not to talk about. Recent history can afford valuable information about conflicts and factions within the community, the important issues, past and current relationships among key people and groups, many of the factors that can trip up any effort before it starts if you don't know about them or you don't know how to address them. Moving on to community leaders, formal and informal. Some community leaders are elected or appointed, let's say the mayors, city councillors, directors of public works. Others are considered leaders because of their activities or their positions in the community. For example, the community activists, corporate CEOs, college presidents, doctors, clergy. Still others are recognized as leaders because they are trusted for their proven integrity, courage, and or they take care of others and the good of the community. Moving on to community culture, which is both formal and informal. Now this covers the spoken and unspoken rules and traditions by which the community lives. It can include everything from the community events and slogans, the blessings of the fishing fleet, the artichoke capital of the world, to norms of behavior, turning a blind eye to alcoholism or abuse or domestic violence, to patterns of discrimination and exercise of power. Understanding the culture and how it is developed can be crucial, especially if that's what you are attempting to change. Next is the existing groups. Most communities have an array of groups and organizations of different kinds. They could be service clubs like the Lions or the Rotary, etc. They could be faith groups, local organizations, sports teams and clubs, or groups formed around shared interests. The boards of community-wide organizations like, for example, the YMCA, the Symphony, United Way, as well as groups devoted to self-help, advocacy and activism. Knowing of the existence and importance of each of these groups can pave the way for alliances or for understanding opposition. Next is existing institutions. Every community has institutions that are important to it and that have more or less credibility with the residents. Colleges and universities, libraries, religious institutions, hospitals, all of these and many others occupy important places in the community. It's important to know what they are, who represents them, and what influences they wield. Next is the economics. Who are the major employers in the community? What if any business or industry is community's base? Who, if anyone, exercises economic power? How is the wealth distributed? Would you characterize the community as poor, working, middle class, affluent? What are the economic aspects of the population? What are their future prospects in general? And the population that you are concerned with. Next is government politics. Understanding the structure of community government is obviously important. Some communities may have strong mayors and weak city councils. Others might have the opposite. Now, still other communities may have no mayors at all, but only a town manager, or may have a different form of government entirely. Now, whatever the government structure, where does the political power lie? Understanding where the real power is can be the difference between a successful effort and a vain one. Next is the social structure. Now, many aspects of social structure are integrated into other areas. Could be the relationships, politics, economics. But there are also questions of how people in the community relate to one another on a daily basis. How problems are or aren't resolved. Who socializes or does business with whom. This area also includes perceptions and symbols of status and respect, and whether status carries entitlement or responsibility or both. Next is attitudes and values. Again, much of this area may be covered by investigations into others, particularly culture. What does the community care about and what does it ignore? What are residents' assumptions about the proper way to behave, to dress, to do business, to treat others? Is there widely accepted discrimination against one or more groups by the majority or those in power? What are the norms for interaction among those who, with different opinions or different backgrounds, are present in the community? Now, moving on to defining the community. Gus Field in 1975 put forward two main uses of the term community. Number one, the location, geographic notion of the community, such as the towns, cities, villages, etc. Number two, the feeling of belongingness and formation of human relationships between people, irrespective of geographical location. Community psychologists have postulated the presence of four elements in the definition of any community. Now, these are: number one, membership. Membership is the feeling of belonging or sharing a sense of personal relatedness. Number two, influence. A sense of mattering, of making a difference to a group and the group mattering to its members. Number three is the integration and fulfillment of needs, which is the feeling that the members' needs will be met by the resources received through their membership in the group. And number four is the shared emotional connection, the commitment and the belief that members have shared and will share history, commonplaces and time together and similar experiences. This is the feeling one sees in farmers' faces as they talk about their home place, their land and their families. Next, we move on to membership. Membership refers to the feeling of belongingness and relatedness towards a particular group or a community. This membership can be based on a variety of criterion, for example, race, gender, ethnicity, common values, common geographical location, etc. Essentially, a closed circle is created for members within which to develop intimacy, to express needs and feelings, and to share common experiences with other members. There are many factors influencing membership or the feeling of belongingness in a group. These factors depend on number one, emotional safety that one feels in a community. Number two, the sense of belonging and identification towards the community. Number three, personal investment in the sense of community. And number four, a common symbol system, that is, the symbolic nature of all true behaviors or interactions within the community. Moving on to disadvantages. The main framework for memberships into community also serves at its biggest disadvantage. Now, by definition, boundaries are meant to encircle something, that is, keep something in. It also serves the purpose of keeping something out. In the community setting, boundaries imply that while some people are in the community, others are out of it. A sort of binary opposition occurs. Those who adhere to the criterions of the community are accepted, and those who don't are seen as deviant and cast out. The pain and rejection felt by the deviants also affects individual and group behavior and brings about feelings of animosity and distrust between the members and the non-members. Now, for community psychologists, the main focus becomes to see who is deviant in the community and why. For that, one has to first identify what is considered the norm and what is considered deviant behavior, which differs not only from place to place, also about person to person. Next, we shall talk about the influence. Influence is also a binary phenomenon in communities. On one hand, in order for a member to be attracted to a particular group, he or she has to have or think that they have some influence on the group and the memberships. On the other hand, the group as a whole also needs to ensure that it exerts some influences on its members so as to ensure the group cohesiveness. Now, according to theorists, the following propositions that I shall be telling you concerning influence can be drawn from several group cohesiveness researchers. 1. Members are more attracted to a community in which they feel they are influential. 2. There is a significant positive relationship between cohesiveness and a community's influence on its members to conform. Thus, both conformity and community influence on members indicates the strength of the bond. Number 3. The pressure for conformity and uniformity comes from the needs of the individual and the community for consensual validation. This conformity serves as a force for closeness as well as an indicator of cohesiveness. Influence of a member on the community and influence of the community on a member operate concurrently, and one might expect to see the force of both operating simultaneously in a tightly knit community. What are the disadvantages? One's inability to influence a group may cause one to reject membership of that group, even if it is important for one's social functioning. The second disadvantage is that the group's influence on its members may have negative as well as positive consequences, just like fanaticism. Let's go on to the next topic, which is integration and fulfillment of needs. Reinforcement and need fulfillment is a primary function of a strong society. Some of the rewards that are effective reinforcers of communities are the status of the membership, success of the community, and competence or capabilities of other members. There are many other undocumented needs that communities fill. but individual values are the source of these needs. The extent to which individual values are shared among community members will determine the ability of a community to organize and prioritize its need fulfillment activities. A strong community is able to fit people together so that people meet others' needs while they meet their own. The shared emotional needs and events facilitate the feelings of belongingness to a community and increase the chances of cohesion among community members. Now I will tell you about some of the principles of shared emotional connection. The first principle is that of contact hypothesis, which states that the more people interact, the more they are likely to become close and share their experiences and needs. The next is quality of interaction. Studies show that the quality of interaction influences feelings of sense of community. More positive interactions, more the sense of community feelings. The third is shared valent event hypothesis. Community bonds tend to be greater among members if they all experienced a shared event. For example, people who go through a crisis together do bond a lot more than the other people who may not have had a shared event. And finally, the spiritual bond. The stronger the religious and or spiritual tie between people, the more is the sense of community belonging. Let me give you a definition of community by various disciplines. Let's take the definition from geography. A group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Sociology. A group in which individuals who make up that group are motivated to take part in the group purely by self-interest. Archaeology. The term community is used in two ways in archaeology, paralleling usage in other areas. The first is an informal definition of community as a place where people used to live. In that sense, it is synonymous with the concept of ancient settlement, whether a hamlet, village, town or city. The second meaning is similar to the usage of the term in other social sciences. A community is a group of people living near one another who interact socially. Biology. A locality inhabited by a group of any size of whose members use a common language, manners, law, culture and tradition. Ecology. An assemblage or association of population of two or more different species occupying the same geographical area. Psychology states that four elements are present in defining a sense of community: membership, influence, integration and fulfillment of needs, and shared emotional connection. Let me conclude. Despite the four elements postulated for its definition, community is still a very ambiguous term, partly because theorists are still unsure whether to use its geographical definition or its social one. Another reason for issues in defining a sense of community is the fact that the four elements in themselves are very general and vague. Ideas about each element vary from community to community, and so each definition also varies. Community refers to the locational, geographical notion of communities such as towns, cities, villages, as well as a feeling of belongingness and formation of human relationships between people. Membership, influence, integration and fulfillment of needs and shared emotional needs are all elements of a sense of belonging. Membership in communities is based on certain shared characteristics between all the groups. One's influence on fellow community members and the community's influence on oneself both define the depth of community belongingness. More the integration into a group, more the sense of belonging of that group or community. Even within communities, those members who share past emotional events are more likely to be closer than members of a community that do not share past emotional events.